All right, everyone. Welcome to AirWAVs, a podcast series purpose-built for integrators seeking industry insights, technology trends, and an overall fun way to digest the latest in wired and wireless technologies. I'm Zach Hubeck, WAV's VP of Sales and Marketing, and I've got some buddies with me today. In this episode 2 of our 2019 podcast, we're going to be discussing everything E-rate with our good friends at Ruckus Network. So I want the group to say hi to Erik Heinrich and Rich Nedwich. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Zach. Hello. Thanks for having us.
No problem. Glad you guys are on. Happy New Year to you. So folks listening in at home, we've got Erik Heinrich, who is the Senior Manager Business Development for Ruckus Networks. And then we've got Rich Nedwich, who's the Global Director of Education at Ruckus Networks. And today's theme is going to be all E-rate, everything E-rate. And we're going to have a great session here. It's going to be about a 45-minute session, nice, easily digestible on a commute, and people can listen to this at home. So, gentlemen, why don't we start with introductions? Why don't you both take a turn? We'll go Erik first. What's your role within Ruckus, and why are you the chosen ones? How are you relevant to E-rate?
Well, so as you mentioned, I'm the Senior Manager of Education Business Development. I guess that's just kind of fancy term for being the kind of the K-12 subject matter expert. I basically provide some relevant updates around that K-12 needs. I attend all the national conferences. I gather and collect a bunch of the information about what's going on in education and help make sure that we're aligned internally, both in our E-rate program and overall our K-12 business, to ensure that our exec team, our sales team, that they're all really well positioned with our E-rate strategy, and that we're on point for our channel partners to really win out there.
Erik, weren't you in the seat at a school district level or a school level before, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, thank you. So I originally started in private sector IT, but then I spent 7 years with San Francisco Unified School District. I was an IT director there and an interim CTO. So I had a great fortune to build a fantastic professional network of fellow CTOs and IT directors. One thing that if you're selling into the education space, that all of these guys talk to each other. In fact, we hear from so many different salespeople that the only real voice of truth that we tend to rely on is our fellow IT directors. So it's really important what your reputation is as a channel partner, as a reseller in this business, because it gets around, good or bad. And so I serve as that perspective for a subject matter expert and possibly your target prospects kind of perspective.
I love it. Great to walk in somebody else's shoes so you understand the pain points and the process and what's important to everybody. So that's really cool. All right, Rich, you're up. Swing the bat, brother.
Sure. Thank you. So my role at Ruckus is really to understand the business of the education markets and to make Ruckus relevant to them and to our audiences there. As Erik mentioned, if I can make this relevant to Erik, then I hope I can make this relevant to everyone, right? So what are the trends and how does that align to, in our case, to the infrastructure and to the management of it and securing of that infrastructure? Those are the kind of things that I look at. And then what are the messages that we want to convey, and how can we enable our partners to carry those messages to market, to get in front of prospects and win those meetings and earn their trust, and hopefully keep those relationships going. And as Erik said correctly, that they talk. And so it's important that we find those messages and understand why they like Ruckus and are interested in Ruckus, so that we can engage them in conversations with the hope that eventually we can jointly secure their business. So I'm coming at this from a long time ago, engineering background, but most recently, this is my 5th wireless company. So I'm very familiar both with Ruckus as well as our competitors and what we typically say and what we typically offer into this market. So hopefully we can give you some good information today related to our infrastructure as well as E-rate. I've been doing E-rate for about 5 years now, which is a very channel-centric activity, as I'm sure everyone listening here is well aware.
Nice. Love it. All right. So why don't we just jump right into it, guys? It's January 10th. Everybody's saying Happy New Year, and that doesn't necessarily correlate to the E-rate calendar, does it? Where are we at in the cycle right now? as far as 2018, 2019 E-rate. If you could take the audience through that quick macro synopsis of where we're at in the cycle and what the normal E-rate calendar looks like, I think that'd be great.
Sure. So I'll give a little bit of insight, and Rich, I'll let you correct all my factual mistakes. So, at a macro level, at this point, many schools have already gone out and have assessed, what is it that they think they need. That process probably has taken them the last 12 months. They've had and engaged with a number of their local resellers out there, helping them identify what their needs are, how they're going to solve some of their pain points. So they've largely begin the process of putting together those lists of what they want. Many of which have already put together their Form 470s. That is the RFP for those who are more familiar with kind of the public bidding process, kind of where they itemize what it is that they're looking for, and they're requesting proposals from resellers at this point. I'd say that we anticipate somewhere around. It's hard to know how many will totally be applying. We can tell you how many have remaining budget, but we don't really know that all of them are going to apply. So we've seen accelerated submissions of these 470 forms this year. We're almost 150% plus ahead of where we were in terms of submitted Form 470s at this same point of time last year. And so we believe, that could just simply be a number of school districts trying to use all the remaining budget that they have left in this final year of this current E-rate order. There's an anticipation that perhaps next year things are going to change, budgets are going to change and or be reset, meaning that they could lose if they have anything in their existing budget remaining. So they're all rushing out to basically file. We can only guess that we're probably somewhere between 30 to 50% of total E-rate filings being filed so far, but that's completely a guess. We are noticing, if you look back at 2018, because of the protracted way that funding gets distributed or dispersed, as USAC calls it, the way that gets dispersed is once it's been approved, it does take some time for schools to then order their products, write the contract with their vendor, and then have that product deployed. And only once that product is deployed can the vendor finally invoice for that. So we're actually seeing 2018's invoicing coming in. They're at about $320 billion worth of committed funds at that point, the dispersed funds, I should say. So they're in an accelerated pace, carrying over from last year projects that are being completed, as well as filings for the new year. So we're still in this bidding cycle, and coming up here on the 19th of January, we're going to go into the next cycle where they open the ability for schools to formally announce via the next form, the 471, who was selected. So Rich, I'll let you correct me from there and take it.
No. I think you're right on point, Erik. The only area where, like you said, we really don't know, if I had to put a percentage on where we are in the E-rate market, in the E-rate filing portion, we know the dates, but we don't know what percentage of schools have filed who are going to file, right? That's not really knowable. But like I said, I've been doing this for a number of years, and historically, end of the year, so let's say, the season, strictly speaking, is July 1st through June 30th. So from July 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2018, for example, that period, that end of the year, typically we see about 20% of E-rate filings coming in by then. But because we've had such a large number of filings this year, we're kind of scratching our heads, as we just said. Is it folks are filing early and trying to get their filings in ahead of time, or is it really just a huge number of schools filing this year? If I had to put a wager on it, I'd say the latter. I think there's going to be a lot of schools filing this year. It's just hard for me to believe that suddenly schools are going to be pulling in their filings like never before. So I think this is going to be a huge year, which is a great opportunity for our partners to participate in this E-rate season. And if it is along the lines of 20-something%, that means there's still plenty of opportunity out there to continue to engage with your existing schools that you're working with to make sure they're going to file and that you're on top of that and you're following with it. Again, at the end of the day, just as a reminder, and I say this all the time, it's all about partners and bidding on these deals to make money. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but unless you've successfully bid and your bid was accepted, then there's no opportunity. So
Yep.
I think there's plenty of time. This is the time to really get busy and get focused, heads down, and execute.
So, gentlemen, if I could just recap the Form 470, okay, guys, January 19th is what I heard. That's when the 470s end. And a 470 is truly defined as I am a school. I have been granted money from USAC, the federal government, to deploy technology in my school. Now, I fill out a Form 470 and say, resellers, integrators, I am interested in using these federal monies. Please come bid on me. Is that correct?
Almost. So the date is actually January 16th.
Got it.
So right now the bid requests are happening, right? So from July 1st on, the school can file a bid request. Starting January 16th, that's when the Form 471 window opens. So what Erik mentioned is this is when they start naming who the winners of the bids are.
Got it.
And that's when it really gets interesting. Now, these Form 470s are going to continue to be filed through February 27th. That's when that window closes. So again, the window for the filing closes on February 27th. The window for naming the winners, if you will, or Form 471 filings opens on January 16th, so in 6 days, and that window closes March 27th. So you've got from January 16th to March 27th to work with your schools and make sure that your bids are accepted, those deals are going forward. And if they haven't filed yet, and we think at least 2/3, 3/4 of schools haven't filed yet, it's not too late to get those meetings with those schools and get preference for yourselves and hopefully for us and drive your business.
Got it. Got it. And I think, Erik, we get a little bit of background noise going on from your phone. I think you may be driving down the 80 East potentially. If you could, wouldn't mind killing that, or maybe put yourself on mute while Rich is speaking, that would be awesome.
Sure.
All right. Very cool. Okay, guys. So we've talked about 470s, 471s. You had mentioned USAC, Erik. I don't want to take for granted the audience knows everything about USAC and what is a spin number. If you could take a moment and just talk about those two basic things, that would be great.
Sure. So USAC is the administrative branch that is selected by the FCC to oversee the E-rate program. They basically, although the money is managed by the FCC, that is used for E-rate, and for those of you who don't know where that money comes from, anybody who pays a phone bill will see a small service charge on there, or small tax, I should say, on their phone bill. That is where the money comes from. It's usually just a few pennies. And those few pennies add up, as you can imagine, the number of phones within the United States. So those pennies are then all collected to go into this funding source that is then administered by USAC. And USAC is the one that then runs the E-rate program and ensures that everyone is in compliance in terms of the process. And creates the policies and eligibility around what schools can be awarded and can purchase with these funds, and then distributes that funding through this process as well. A SPIN number is a service provider identification number. So anyone who wants to sell products and make bids on E-rate and then be able to claim that money in an eligible way must have a SPIN number. So these are called service providers. Resellers are referred to as service providers. And so you would require a service provider identification number, which you apply for online. And it's worth noting that before you can collect or submit an invoice, you have to ensure that you have filed your what they call a SPAC. They love acronyms, right? In the government, everything has an acronym, and everybody nobody, you ask 10 people, you'll probably get 10 answers, but it's a service provider has to update their information using a form 473. And that just certifies that you're going to comply with all the program rules and requirements. But I just mentioned that so that those of you who may already be working for a company with a SPIN number, just make sure that they have updated their service provider information via the online portal and filed their Form 473 this year to ensure that they can file the invoice when you've won the business.
Very cool. Thank you for spacking to that point, Erik.
just a quick clarification, if I may.
Go, Rich, go.
Yeah, sorry. I've grown up in the same period and worked in the same period as Erik, where we all said SPIN number. But I am reminded that these days they actually have a different acronym or different number to remember. So as a reseller, you're looking for a 498 ID. So if you're looking for a SPIN number and you go to the USAC website to obtain one, you're going to find information about how to obtain a 498 ID. But basically, that is your service provider identification number or SPIN number. So even more administrivia to remember, which is the good and the bad of E-Rate.
No, I love it. Very good. So guys, on the Ruckus network side, let's say you're an integrator, you have your 498 ID, formerly the SPIN number, you've done your SPAC 473 filings, you are compliant with the government, you can bid now on these 470s. What kind of cool programs does Ruckus have from a educational standpoint? Get me up to speed. Can you guys help me identify Form 470s that are out there? If you guys can speak to that and some of the cool Ruckus Networks programs you guys have in place, I think that'd be helpful.
Sure. So we do lots of different things for our partners. We have a pretty robust E-Rate program internally. We have a great team. Rich and I obviously are key members of that team, but we have a group of folks who are constantly trying to make sure that we have the right things in place to enable our channel to really go win this business. What we try to do is really help them better target. So one of the things that we want to make sure people are doing is that they know who they can go after. As everybody who's been listening can already tell, all of these different forms that we've talked about, all this administrative overhead, that's already a lot of work. That's a lot of things to be doing that are typically outside of the normal sales, field salesperson or account manager's, area of focus, right? They're out there trying to close business. And in E-Rate, what typically tends to happen is people are looking for these Form 470s as the school's raising their hand saying, place a bid. And so schools will sometimes, or rather resellers will often say, okay, this is my opportunity to come in and start this process, when in reality, that process started months and months ago when those schools were trying to determine who and what they needed, right? So starting early was the key. So how do those resellers know who to be working with? They have boots on the ground. In theory, they should really know who their local customer prospects are and be working with those well in advance. But Ruckus really works very closely with our channel organization and our partner account managers to help provide them with some target lists of schools and districts who have remaining budget, and with data around what they may have purchased in the past, where they may be in their refresh cycle in terms of different infrastructure related to relevant to Ruckus's products and solutions, and then we have a number of different tools and resources available on our ruckusnetworks.com/E-Rate website that I'll let Rich speak to a bit more.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question, because we really try, our team internally here, Erik and myself and many others, we try to do as much as we can to enable our partners to be successful, obviously selling Ruckus, but especially in primary ed and E-Rate. We offer partner sales training. Erik, I know, spends a significant amount of his time on calls and webinars, crisscrossing the country, attending partner events, distributor events, and doing everything he can to help train the channel. Some others do as well, but I think Erik really leads the charge. In addition, we have sales incentives through our program deal protection through deal registration. We've put in place bidding incentives and margin incentives to allow our partners to make more money through E-rate. We have sales enablement. Erik touched on an important one, our hunt list that we generate every year. It's public information, but pulling it, qualifying it, distributing it to our partners is helpful, and let them know which schools, districts, libraries are most likely to file due to their available budget each year, as well as a number of bidding tools that we put on our partner portal. And we also have worked with we have on retainer an E-rate consultant from E-rate ProfitWorks, who is available to us and to our partners as well when we really get into the deep weeds and need some sales support on specific opportunities. And then we have marketing support. We have lead generation campaigns, partner campaign kits. We do webinars, events. We've got sales tools. We have this E-rate backpack in our partner portal where we put all this collateral and bidding tools and whatnot, as well as partner newsletters, E-rate program updates. We do a partner webinar series where every month we do another E-rate topic. So if it sounds like I'm going on and on, I am. We're really passionate about making our partners as successful as possible. And you know, it's not a huge team here focused on E-rate, but the impact through our partners is huge. We have a tremendous number of reseller partners, and the ones that are focused on E-rate, we want them to be as successful as possible.
Yeah, I think it gets back to, and I'm telling my sales organization all the time, leverage your network. You know, don't go it alone. What tools, what assets do you have out there? Make sure you're asking for the tools and the support. And it's great that you guys have invested so much in the Ruckus channel to make sure everybody's successful there. So a tip of the cap to you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you.
Erik, you had mentioned that the resellers, the integrators should have boots on the ground, local touch to schools, school districts, know what kind of funding they have. Aren't there some very specific guidelines as far as trainings or demo equipment or things you can do with the end user? There's very specific rules of engagement. If you can speak to that, that'd be great.
Sure. No, and I'm glad you bring that up. So these are general public sector gifting limitations, right? What you have to be very cautious about is not trying to provide any undue influence to that organization. And you may, what I typically hear is, well, this other reseller is doing it, or this other vendor is giving away X, Y, and Z. Let them do that unless you think you look really good in an orange jumpsuit, because the feds don't mess around. Okay. So we really want to pay attention to the gifting limitations that can have, there are both federal gifting limitations as well as that particular school or district may have its own rules that are even more stringent beyond that. And you always want to abide by the most stringent. So my recommendation is always to be very cautious about gifting. Now, demos are a great question because it's a bit of a gray area. This was raised at a recent E-rate program update by USAC here in Sacramento, California. And the response by USAC was that demos are indeed acceptable. You can provide a demo, but you must be sure that you have clear terms that the demo is limited to a certain evaluation period. And at the conclusion of that period, any goods or services worth a value that have a value, so hardware, must be returned, hardware or software, I should say, should be returned back to the vendor who loaned it to them to validate it. Right. So the idea is nothing can be gifted to that school district with the hopes that now that they have this seeded equipment, they will clearly buy more of my stuff. That is a clear violation of the rules. And don't think for a second that your competitors out there are not going to blow the whistle on you. There are anonymous tip lines, and the consequences are indeed very severe. So just be cognizant of the rules, but you can certainly provide demos. Just put a term limit on it. They recommend no greater than 6 months, and even 6 months would be pushing it. So preferred to be 90 days or less, according to USAC, and to ensure that you have a very clear written understanding on file that states that the expectation is that they will return all these products to you, the vendor, within that time frame.
Give me back my apparati is what it
Correct.
should state. Understood.
And signed.
All right, exactly. In writing is great. Cool. Guys, I have seen, and from what I understand, there's different categories of products. So there's category 1 products, there's category 2. Can you talk to that a little bit, and where does Ruckus Networks fit in the whole category 1, category 2 product mix?
Sure. Let me take a stab at that. So, category 1, broadly speaking, are fundamental services like internet access. So, broadband to the curb, if you will, is a common application. And in the not too recent past, things like voice services to the school would be examples of category 1 services. It used to be called priority 1. Category 2 would be the internal distribution of that. So, for example, if I'm bringing gigabit connectivity to the curb, how am I getting that connectivity to a student sitting in a classroom on the second floor of a middle school? Well, I do that through what's called internal connection. So I have to somehow convey that broadband through a firewall, through wired switching networks, to a wireless network to their Chromebook that was deployed by the school, for example. So that's the combination of things. Category 1 is the broad level and higher level bit, if you will, of providing that access. And then the internal connections, or category 2, again, very simply put, is how do I get that to the student in the place of learning?
Got it. Very good. Okay. So let's say an integrator wants to get started. They have not gone down the path of getting a SPIN number, now a 498 ID number. Let's say they want to go down that path. Who internally at Ruckus should they start with to start walking down this path?
Well, they can certainly reach out to our E-Rate help desk. So we've set up an email distribution for E-Rate help desk. I believe we have it at aris.com, our parent company, and that will route to our E-Rate team, and we can give them specific instructions or connect them to an E-Rate consultant if they're going to need more help than that.
All
that
right.
would be step 1. We also have on our partner portal a partner FAQ, which I believe will answer about 90% of their questions on all the processes, such as this one. It'll give you the links on where to go on the USAC website, click here to go to this forum to download and try it out, etc. I would start with the partner FAQ on our partner portal, and then from there, we also have what we call a VAR workshop. So our partner account managers deliver to our partners who raise their hand and say, we want to go after E-Rate with Ruckus this year. We have a full-blown training, sales training, that goes over all the particulars of the E-Rate process, as well as what we offer in category 2, what's eligible, what's not eligible, what resources are available to you as a partner to go after this market, who your team is within your region, what are the promotions, what are the sales, what are the prices that I can use, the discounts that I can get, whether it's purely as a bidder or as a driver of a deal because I've been involved early and I've managed to deal register this opportunity. So all those bits of training that are specific to education and to E-Rate are delivered by Ruckus to our partners. And we have a way to deliver that to you. You just need to let us know this is the business you want to go after.
Nice. Can we get back to 470s for just one moment here, guys?
Go for it.
So I imagine during the 470 process, the end user really knows at this point that I want some type of technology. Do they know going into a 470 environment, I want to ride with Ruckus or I want to ride with an alternative technology solution? And do they identify that in the 470? And secondly, if alternatives are acceptable, let's say they decide to bid, they're wanting to procure something aside from Ruckus, and it says alternatives available. Can you give some advice for the viewership at home that states, okay, these 470s, we know that is absolutely Loctite with another manufacturer. Don't go after these. Do go after these 470s. Kind of a multifaceted question there, guys.
Sure. I'll give it a shot at starting it off, but so definitely in terms of do schools know what they want? I would say, as a former IT person, an IT director, and through my peers that I work with frequently, by and large, yes. The vast majority have already selected a particular technology that was likely recommended to them through a reseller channel partner that they have already been working with for some time. They may have already decided on what it is. It could be that they have already deployed some equipment that requires them to stay within a certain ecosystem, or they're looking to simply expand on an existing deployment. Right. So by and large, yes. And that is actually the key. That is the key to winning this business. If you haven't helped drive that preference, if you are not the reseller that's been in there working with this customer to drive that preference, your chance of winning an RFP that states a competitor's name or equivalent are significantly reduced. Let's say under 5% chance of winning. Right. Now, that's not to say that not all school districts may consider an equivalent. Equivalency is a bit fuzzy. Okay, so every RFP that goes out there, a school district must have a rubric that is publicly shared and available to show how things will be scored. And the number one thing on that rubric must be price in terms of the weighting of the value of that bid. However, that one item can be outweighed by multiple following items on that rubric. So there may be additional items on the rubric that state that it must be compatible with the existing, some other portion of their infrastructure, the bid product. The vendor must be bidding all items within the RFP, not just a portion of the items. The vendor must be local or have an office or be able to respond to needs of the school in person within so much time, right? So there's a number of things that the school can stack up on their rubric that will help you identify whether or not this is something you should go for, i.e. a 470 comes out and states a solution that is not something that you're looking to bid on. They're not a Ruckus Networks channel partner, let's say. And within the rubric, not only, of course, it states price as the heaviest weighted, but it will also say that it must interoperate with a proprietary piece of infrastructure from that same said other vendor, solution provider. Well, you're pretty much locked out at that point, right? Because they've indicated it as a requirement, and when you submit a bid, you will not be able to meet that, and therefore you will lose that portion of the scoring, and your bid's not going to win, right? So you really want to drive preference. Equivalency, which is a requirement by USAC in the terminology that you post, is a bit of a fallacy, I would like to say. I think that the idea is to have open bidding process. That is a requirement of public bidding. And so that's why this term is in there. However, equivalency is not very clearly defined. It's defined per the school district who posted the 470 largely, right? What makes something equivalent? And in some cases, we'll simply say equivalency is subject to the determination of the school district who has filed the 470. So they could look at it and just simply make a internal justification for why something is not equivalent. But at Ruckus, we do have some high-level equivalency data to be able to say, competitor's product X, in terms of speeds, feeds, performance, is equivalent to Ruckus product Y, to help our channel really be able to identify in those cases where it doesn't really sound like there's preference. They may use a competitor's name in the same way that we use Kleenex, right? When you say pass me a Kleenex, you mean a tissue, right? So you've used a brand name to kind of serve as an example for something that you'd like.
Or give me a Q-tip.
Right.
Exactly.
So I'll just mention real quick, great summary, Erik, that that equivalency table is posted on our E-rate backpack on our partner portal to download as a tool. So if you're not sure, let's say you were carrying a different infrastructure coming into this year and you're not familiar with the Ruckus vernacular and SKUs yet, then that would be a good tool for you to take advantage of.
Nice.
A couple of tips I might offer though, because it is a little confusing. You get all these bid requests coming in a flurry, and from now on to the end of the season, it's going to get thicker and thicker with more and more bids coming in. There's a few things you can do to try to ascertain whether it's worth your time to place a bid or not, because you can only bid so many at a time, right? These are 28-day sales cycles. There's a lot of overhead and red tape associated to responding to a bid. So you don't want to spend all of your time responding to a whole bunch of small bids where you don't have a good chance. If you think it's of interest, but you're not sure, each bid does give a contact and must give a contact back to someone who can answer a technical question about that 470. It might be a consultant that the school's working with. It could be the IT director of the school. It could be someone in purchasing. But whoever it is, it'll say who to contact and how to contact them. And you need to follow that. If it says call Amy in purchasing and only use her email, don't call the IT director. Because what you don't know is that they may hang up from that call and say, well, they're out. They didn't respect our wishes and our policies. So always follow their recommendations. But reach out to these schools and ask for clarification. Are you open to an equivalent bid? Are you refreshing your network or merely expanding a little bit? Right? Questions like that relate to the 470, they must answer. They don't have to answer quickly. If they turn around and give you a response right away or within 24, 48 hours, they're probably open to working with you and hearing more bids. If you don't get a response within 48 hours, it's probably because they were looking for something very specific or they want to work with their existing partner, and that's a clue, right? So the silence is maybe enough for you to realize you need to move on. So that's one of my quick tip suggestions. The other is to simply look for key language in the filing, either in the RFP attached to the bid or in the bid itself, to see whether they say this is a network refresh or replacement, which is good, or is it an expansion, which is bad. So if they already have, if it's 10 schools and 5,000 students and they're an existing, let's say, Cisco shop by default, well, I'll just say Cisco because they're the largest company out there. And they already have a lot of Cisco. And they're filing and they say, we want 50 Cisco APs. Well, that sounds very much like an expansion of their existing deployment. So going in there and saying, well, we would rather you have 50 Ruckus APs won't make a lot of sense, right? Because you're not replacing all of their infrastructure. Even if they didn't say must work with my existing infrastructure, the numbers don't bear it out. And so you'd pass on that, right? But if you do see a school, well, let's say 1,000 students, and they're asking for 100, 120 access points, a couple of switches and a controller, that sounds like it could be a whole network refresh. That's worth following up on. So sometimes you have to read the tea leaves a little bit on these bids to determine whether it's worth responding.
Quality advice. I love it. Guys, let me ask this question. In the world of WAVE, we've got pre-sales environments. We've got our engineering team who will literally take blueprints of a school district or multiple buildings, and our engineering crew will go to work and say, okay, you need these many switches. We'll do the network design for you. We'll do AP placement, that type of thing. Does that have to be fully baked in the 470 process, schematics with all of that, or does that happen later in the 471?
That's good. So it varies, right? I would say one thing to be cognizant of is that some schools will have a mandatory site walk when they publish their 470. So within the 470, it says, this must be published for 28 days minimum. It must be publicly published for vendors to be able to bid, and they will have a period where a mandatory site walk is required. And that means the vendor has to come on site and walk with the IT director to validate that what the environment is like. They may only take you to one school. For example, in San Francisco Unified, we had 150 schools. So when we went out for E-rate for infrastructure, there was no way I could walk our vendors through 150 locations. So we picked one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school. That were kind of examples of what the majority of our schools of those types looked like. And then we would give a requirement to simply say, we need this many access points total, or we anticipate this much coverage required. So it really depends what's written into the Form 470. Your opportunity to get an idea of what the environment looks like is if there is a site walk opportunity, which you'll want to make sure if it is mandatory. If you miss it, you can be disqualified. Your bid will maybe not even be looked at. So make sure that when you're looking at it, you've checked that. And it may be included in the 470 and it may not be. So in many cases, it just depends on the language that's been put into the 470 in terms of how they're looking to fulfill their needs.
I would add to that Erik, you're spot on. This is exactly what I was thinking when you were saying it. But sometimes they say optional walkthrough instead of mandatory walkthrough. And as a reseller, I would urge you to go to an optional walkthrough. Mandatory, everybody bidding that deal must go, right? And so, it's sort of cards close to the vest. You want to ask a lot of questions, but you don't want to reveal too much in front of everyone. You won't really have an opportunity, and you should not be selling at that meeting. You should be listening at that meeting and learning. But at an optional walkthrough, fewer may be there. Maybe you'll be the only one who goes, in which case you have a good opportunity to make your opinion known. Like, I see you have 1 AP per classroom, but you may not need that with the latest wireless technologies available. So would you be open to a bid with fewer access points? Right? And that's key, because to have a competitive bid, somehow you have to differentiate yourself. Price being the first and foremost one, but obviously the fit of the solution being the key. At Ruckus, we pride ourselves on having the best APs in the business, period, bar none, proven. However, if you're responding late to a bid that was written for someone else, you're basically bidding the quantity and location based on somebody else's specs, and that's not a great position to be in. What you really want to do is get in there early, have those conversations with the schools, influence them when you can over the summer into the fall, toward the end of the year, so that by the time they file their 470, it is written with what you've told them in mind. So if you've told them that they need every other classroom, or let's say arbitrarily 67 access points for their elementary district, that's what they ask for, right? Because if they're going to say, no, we're just going to do one-for-one placement with what we had, and we had 100 APs, well, now you have to bid 100 APs. And now it's a question of what discount can I get in order to be competitive. That's not a great position to be in, but it's common. But better is to influence it up front.
Sage advice. It almost sounds like job interviewing 101. He who shows up well and shows the most interest is going to get a favorable look. Same thing in selling environments. I'm always telling my salespeople, good things happen when you show up. So sage advice to the audience out there: if it says optional walkthrough, do it. Absolutely. Good. Gentlemen, we have time for one more question. Now, I've seen E-rate environments where replacement product will happen between the 470 and the 471. And by all means, keep me in check if that's erroneous. But have you guys seen environments where by the time someone bids a 470 and a 471, there is a refiling by the school stating that was the technology we were going to go with, but now we've decided this because of whatever reason? Can you speak to that?
So I'll take a swing. It's a little tricky. So yes, I've seen that. I've been there, and that's part of one of the reasons that schools struggle to really embrace E-rate. Obviously, it's money. Money is a challenge in schools, so we take advantage of it every bit we can. But if you think about the complete cycle that we've just described, how long can it be between the time that you've evaluated the technology you need to the time that a contract is signed and the hardware is deployed? You're looking at sometimes 12 to 18 months. Think of how much technology has changed in that time. The number of new products that has come out in that new time. So depending on what product roadmap and what products you're speccing into your 470, things in these different companies that are offering that could change. In fact, you will often see new and improved hardware comes out. And so schools will like to look at those things and change course, change direction, and pick something new. Now, if you've already bid and luckily been awarded that bid, and in that time something new comes out and the school would like to have this newer product substituted, that there is a process called a service substitution. And this involves the initiation by the school district to say, we want this new product or service. It requires acceptance by the awarded service provider, reseller, to say, we are willing to work with the school district to accommodate this request for new product and service, and then they work together between those two organizations to come up with the change that's required. The challenge comes in the fact that whether or not they will have a discrepancy in the cost, right? So that's where the challenge comes in at that point. But it is absolutely possible. There is a process for it, and that is called service substitution.
Very cool. Well, guys, we are at right around the 45-minute mark, and we want these things nice and digestible for folks so that they can listen in on commutes, things like that. Certainly not the last podcast we're going to be doing with Ruckus Networks. I want to thank Erik Heinrich. I want to thank Richard Nedwich for your time today, guys. This has been just great. We've been geeking out on E-Rate for about 45 minutes now, and certainly valuable. So for those of you listening at home, thanks so much for listening in to AirWAVs, Wave Distribution's podcast series in 2019. We look forward to many more of these guys. And gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Zach, and good luck to everyone on E-Rate.
Yeah, thank you, Zach, and good luck, and go get them in the time remaining. Go win.
All right. Thank you, guys.